Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to part 4 of our Guan Let's Talk Lore series titled The Blood Edict. Now, in our last episode, we ended as we mentioned Liu Bei's involvement in the Blood Edict plot, as he betrayed Cao Cao and took over the Shu province. But before we can proceed from here, we need to talk about the Blood Edict plot. And since this is a historical discussion, I have to start with the caveat that the existence of the Blood Edict, or the blood letter written by the emperor on cloth, is a subject of historical debate. According to the Book of the Late Han, the assassination plot against Cao Cao in the year 200 was orchestrated by Dongcheng, who was the general of the chariot at the time, and the father-in-law to the emperor. However, in the Book of the Late Han, there is no mention of a Blood Edict. Only that Dongcheng had secretly plotted with other officials to assassinate Cao Cao, only for the plan to leak ahead of time, leading to their arrest and execution. However, the Blood Edict is not simply a fictional invention by the Romance of Three Kingdoms, as if we look at Liu Bei's chapter in the Records of Three Kingdoms, there is clearly a mentioning of a Blood Edict, as it claims that Dongcheng had received this blood letter written by the emperor on his own cloth, as he was asked by the emperor to find allies to take down the regent Cao Cao, who had held all the power in the court. And historically, Dongcheng did approach Liu Bei first, as Liu Bei was least likely to betray him and the emperor, since Liu Bei had just been acknowledged by the emperor as the imperial uncle. However, Liu Bei did not act on the plot, as he was eventually sent away from the capital by Cao Cao as the new governor of the Yu province, as he marched his army to the city of Xiapi to stop Yuan from escaping north towards Shao. But according to Cao Cao's chapter in the Record of Three Kingdoms, we have a slightly different account, as it would state that sending Liu Bei on this mission was seen at the time as a mistake by Cheng Yu and Guo Jia, who had felt that Liu Bei was best kept in the capital and should not be trusted with leading a military campaign. And it turned out that they were right, as right after Liu Bei had stopped Yuan from moving north, he promptly killed Chezhou, who was the prefect of the Shu province, as Liu Bei retook the province from Cao Cao and rallied to Yuan Shao's banner. Now, the timing of the event described in Cao Cao's chapter of the Record of Three Kingdoms is also quite different and slightly interesting, as it seems to suggest that Liu Bei had killed Chezhou first before Dongcheng's plot was leaked, which signified that Liu Bei's betrayal was part of the plot rather than a reactionary move that occurred after Dongcheng's plot had leaked and failed. But if we turn back to Liu Bei's chapter in the Record of Three Kingdoms, it tells a slightly different one that is closer to how it's portrayed in other historical sources, as it would put the order of the event with Dongcheng's plot first leaking and failing, leading to Liu Bei's betrayal and the killing of Chezhou and the takeover of the Shu province. And in my opinion, this depiction in Liu Bei's chapter makes a lot more sense, as if Liu Bei had killed Chezhou first, it would have prompted a response from Cao Cao and possibly alerted him to the potential plot. And in all likelihood, Cao Cao's chapter was probably more of a hindsight analysis that would categorize Liu Bei's eventual betrayal as part of a larger plot against Cao Cao, and thus it would frame Liu Bei's betrayal starting from the moment that he left the capital rather than the moment where he killed Chezhou. But anyway, none of this solves the issue of whether the Blood Edict exists, as neither the Han record or Cao Cao's record refers to it. So to this end, I have seen some theories floated out there online stating that the Blood Edict could be an invention of Liu Bei, as a mean to legitimize his stance against Cao Cao in the later years, as this continuation of the will of the last emperor of the Han. While this is certainly a possibility, I personally believe that Liu Bei did not need the Blood Edict to exist to achieve this, as his own bloodline alone was good enough for this cause, and with Cao Pi forcing the abdication of the last Han emperor, Liu Bei had enough support from all the Han loyalists. Now, it is far more likely that both the Han and Cao Cao's record purposely censored the existence of the Blood Edict because it was real. Since if you think about it, after the failed assassination attempt, the last thing the Han court would want to do is link the plot directly back to the emperor, as it would endanger him. Certainly, Cao Cao was a tyrannical regent, but he did not show any sign or intent of usurpation. And at the time, there were still many Han loyalists, so keeping the emperor safe to wait for a future opportunity was in their best interest as well. For Cao Cao, the Blood Edict would have been evidence that he did not represent the will of the emperor. It would weaken his control in the government and his ability to issue edicts to other regional lords as a representation of the Han. It would also provide Yuan Shao another legitimate casus belli to wage war against Cao Cao and push more on-the-fence Han loyalists into Yuan Shao's camp. So clearly, it was also not in Cao Cao's best interest to admit the Blood Edict existed, and thus we end up with this slight variation between the various historical records of the time, or at least that's my opinion on the matter. Now, with this settled, let's return to the plot itself. As we mentioned before, initially Dongcheng seeked out Liu Bei to plan out the assassination of Cao Cao. However, while Liu Bei was in the capital, he did not act upon the plan. Now, the reason behind this was not recorded, but in my opinion, Liu Bei probably had the least to gain from assassinating Cao Cao. Because if you think about it, after Liu Bei had joined forces with Cao Cao in their campaign against Lu Bu, Liu Bei finally got the chance to come to the capital, meet the emperor, and receive official acknowledgement that he was indeed related to the imperial bloodline. Now, whether this acknowledgement was just a way for the emperor to find new allies remains debatable, but at least on paper, Liu Bei went from a struggling, wandering warlord to the imperial uncle, who very soon, under the recommendation of Cao Cao himself, became the general of the left and the governor of the Yu province. At this point, there is not much else Liu Bei could possibly gain. Assassinating Cao Cao would help the emperor, but it would not help Liu Bei. Perhaps the emperor could thank him by awarding him a princedom to rule, but the Han had strict rules limiting the power of princedom, so Liu Bei would simply become a caged bird where the cage would be made of gold, as he would end up enjoying a life of luxuries, but he would have to give up his military command. And this is all assuming that killing Cao Cao would somehow not lead to retaliation by those who were still loyal to Cao Cao. Much like how the assassination of Dong Zhuo led to the rule of Guo Si and Li Jue, the assassination of Cao Cao will certainly weaken his force as they will lose a strong leader, but his generals will likely rally around his son, Cao Pi, or his cousin, Cao Ren, and still be a formidable force, not to mention that killing Cao Cao might not stop Yuan Shao from launching his attack, as the Battle of Guan was not simply a grudge match between Cao Cao and Yuan Shao, but a fight for the control of the emperor and the Han. So killing Cao Cao would be akin to gifting the emperor over to Yuan Shao, who, given his vast control of the north, will be much more likely to usurp than Cao Cao at this point. So for all those reasons, Liu Bei did not act, and eventually left the capital as he was sent by Cao Cao to halt Yuan Shu's escape north. However, while the assassination of Cao Cao does not benefit Liu Bei, it can benefit others, as minor officials and generals could elevate their status within the court as they look to become the emperor's savior. And this is how Dongcheng sold the plot to people like Wang Zifu, Zhong Ji, and Wu Shuo. Now, Wang Zifu and Zhong Ji are both lieutenants in the Northern Army, or the Imperial Army in charge of protecting the area north of the capital. Wang Zifu was the lieutenant of the light cavalry, and Zhong Ji was the lieutenant of the navy. Now, according to Han regulations, both of them should have around 700 troops each, and Wu Shuo was a minor court official close to Dongcheng, and together they plotted to assassinate Cao Cao. Now, we have no way of knowing how they planned to kill Cao Cao, nor do we know how the plot leaked. But in January of 200, they were promptly arrested by Cao Cao and sentenced to Yi Sanzu, which was an execution of the three clans closest to them, namely their father's entire clan, their mother's entire clan, and their wife's entire clan. Understand that there is an elaborate story of how one of Dongcheng's servants betrayed him in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but that's just a story for color commentary with no historical basis. All we do know is the plot leaked before it had occurred, and the biggest result of the plot is it forced Liu Bei to betray Cao Cao as he would take over the Xu province after killing Chuzhou, who was the prefect there. Now, there are a few reasons why Liu Bei picked the Xu province over, say, the Yu province, where he is not only the governor, but also a province where the majority of the commanderies rebelled against Cao Cao already. And the rationale behind this is quite straightforward, because he has a ton of connections in the Xu province. Most of his advisors, such as Sun Qian and Mi Zhu, are from the Xu province, as they had joined him after Tao Qian's death, and his army came from the Xu province, as he had recruited most of them while he was the governor of the Xu province. Add on the fact that he was ready in Xiapi, which is a city in Xu province, to stop Yuan Shu. Everything aligned, and Liu Bei was once again a thorn in Cao Cao's side within the Xu province. Now, at this time, Cao Cao was pretty worried about overextending himself with yet another front, as he was mainly concerned with Yuan Shao, who is bound to mobilize after spending about half a year to prepare. So at first, he sent Liu Dai and Wang Zhong, who are both stationed within the Xu province, to attack Liu Bei. But after they failed to defeat Liu Bei, Cao Cao gambled and left nothing to chance, as he decided to personally lead his force east to take down Liu Bei as fast as he can. And obviously, this left an opening for Yuan Shao. And even Tian Feng, who had originally been in Zhu Shuo's camp of taking a slow approach against Cao Cao, saw this opportunity as he rushed to Yuan Shao, pleading for him to attack Xuchang while Cao Cao's main forces were away putting down Liu Bei's rebellion. Sadly, Yuan Shao turned him away, as he told him that his son, Yuan Shang, was ill. Furious, Tian Feng slammed his cane into the ground repeatedly, cursing Yuan Shao that it's over, there's no hope. Opportunities like this come but once in 1,000 years, and you toss it away because your son is sick. Such a shame. Hearing this, Yuan Shao becomes incensed as he tosses Tian Feng out and pretty much stopped listening to Tian Feng's advice going forward. Then, within the same month of January, Liu Bei, who barely has an army, ended up being crushed by Cao Cao, as he and Zhang Fei would escape north, while Guan Yu and Liu Bei's family would end up being captured by Cao Cao. Now, since I have done a full Let's Talk Lore series on this campaign and Guan Yu's time serving under Cao Cao all the way up to Guan Yu's return to Liu Bei, I'm going to brief through this part, as Liu Bei would eventually end up joining Yuan Tan in the Qing province before settling in Pingyuan to regroup his scattered forces and rebuild, as he now officially joins Yuan Shao. And just as swiftly as Cao Cao would crush Liu Bei, Yuan Shang's health would improve, and Yuan Shao now finally turns his attention to the war at hand, except this time, Tian Feng comes out again and pleads for patience, as he argues that now Cao Cao has returned to Xuchang, things are going to be different. Still infuriated with Tian Feng, Yuan Shao would order for Tian Feng's arrest, on the grounds that Tian Feng is damaging their morale by boasting about Cao Cao's commanding talent and success. Then in February, roughly 7 months after Yuan Shao's initial war declaration, his armies would finally mobilize as his vanguard unit, commanded by Guo Tu, Chun Yuqiong, and Yan Liang, ferries across the Yellow River to attack Baima Crossing, while Yuan Shao would station his main forces in Liyang. So with that, the long-awaited Guandu campaign is finally underway, and we'll come back here next time to look at all the minor battles leading up to the showdown at Guandu. So hopefully you all enjoy this episode, and I'll see you all then. Bye!